Hello, welcome to Sports Psychology Screencast. Today's focus is going to be leadership in sport. All right, so what we're looking at here then, if you have a look over to Sports Psychology, these are the areas we've covered so far, down to leadership, okay, and then we've got stress management to do after. So what I've done here is highlighted blue areas that of previous knowledge that may help today's lesson on leadership. Okay, so if we go back over to here, I'll explain that as we go through. Things we have to know then, we need to know the characteristics of effective leaders. We need to know whether a leader is an emergent leader or they're a prescribed leader and the effect this has on performance. We also need to have an understanding of leadership styles, which you might have understanding from different subjects. For example, business studies, you might have looked at this. On top of that, we'll look at theories of leadership. So this is the key link really, because these theories in sports psychology kind of come across the same no matter which topic you're doing, because according to sports psychology there's three ways in which we kind of develop different traits. In this case, in the past we've looked at personality theories, now we're looking at leadership. If you look down here, you can see that the names of the theories of personality are the same as the theories of leadership. So you've got trait, social learning, interaction. So this is talking about different approaches as to where these qualities or traits come from. So we'll have a look then, maybe at the start of the lesson, just making sure we can recap these personality theories, because that'll be really helpful when we're looking at the leadership theories. So finally, we have a look at Chalodaro's multidimensional model of leadership, okay? And this will be something we do in the second lesson on leadership. So they're your key areas. That's what you need to know. So if we get started, first thing we'll have a look at then is the following. So emergent or prescribed leaders, what does that mean? Okay, well, you could probably work out from the word emergent, that the leaders will emerge from within the group. So if we have a look first of all then at this, emergent leaders come from within the group. That's our first thing. Okay, so you can think of that. I'm sure you can think examples of how that works. So a leader, of course, could be something like a coach. It could be a manager. It could be a captain. Okay, it could be any of these things. But ultimately, if that person comes from within the group, they're called an emergent leader. Now, an example of this could be cricket players. I've put on here, voted in a captain. Or if you look at, say, for example, in a professional setup, you might have an assistant coach becoming a head coach. You see that all the time, them stepping up to that position. I remember as back in Sven-Göran Eriksson's days as England football coach, his assistant coach was Steve McClaren, who then became the head coach for England. Okay, so that's an example you can see. I'm sure you can think of your own examples there. Going down from there then, the next thing we need to have an understanding, I suppose, is, what are the benefits, what are the advantages of having a leader that's emerged from the group? And I'm sure you can start to think of those yourself. So the key advantages are that, if you come from within the group, you're readily accepted by the group. They respect you. You've shown that you will put effort in. Okay, so that they voted you in a lot of the time. Therefore, that can be really good for that leader in terms of acceptance. Now, the second thing is they understand the group dynamics, which is absolutely vital. You understand the communication pathways between players. You understand who communicates best with who, and these can often help performance. Now, of course, there is downside to emergent leaders. Okay, so sometimes the team can become over familiar with a leader because they're used to having them maybe as a teammate or maybe in slightly lesser position of authority if it's an assistant coach. Okay, so that's the first type of leader. Okay, so emergent, I'm sure you can start to think now, this happens a lot in modern professional sport, prescribed leaders. Okay, so prescribed leader, okay, means that they're selected from outside the group. Okay, or you could say they're externally appointed. So that's what a prescribed leader is, complete opposite from coming from within the group. So then you go down and say, what's an example for that? I'm sure you can think of those. So you've got, for example, a new football manager being appointed from another team. You see it in kind of a modern football all the time. Very rare that a football manager lasts above 2 years, 3 years. Okay, they're constant kind of spate, I suppose, of prescribed leaders. So that could be one thing, or a new player can be signed as a captain. I remember very recently, if you look at Aston Villa, signed John Terry. John Terry then became the captain straight away. Okay, so that could be an example of someone as a prescribed leader coming into a club. Going on from there then, advantages of a prescribed leader. Okay, so what we've got then. The key thing here, and I think, we would also that sometimes you can get used to the same voice. So if you have a new leader coming in, this new voice, new ideas can actually re-motivate players, particularly those who were kind of demotivated at the time of the previous leader. Now, The disadvantage, okay, is that obviously someone coming from the outside will not understand the group dynamics and communication pathways between players. So they will be a key thing. So you can see there we've got to kind of explain each leader, give an example of it, and then we need to be able to kind of just say, okay, what are the benefits of having each of these types of leaders, but can we say something that's a disadvantage? So that's your first section on there. Now what we'll have a look at then is have a look at the characteristics or qualities of an effective leader. Okay, so if you are an effective leader, there are certain things that make you, or certain qualities that you will have. So, for example, these are some that are kind of specification reference. These are some that are most recently come up in an exam mark scheme. So I'll make sure these are it. An effective leader must be able to communicate with the team well. Okay, they must have charisma to get people behind them, no matter what they are doing or what approach they are focusing on. They must be confident, both in front of the team and in front of the media, if it's a professional sport. And then really, really key one for where we're going to be looking is they must have flexibility. So they must be able to switch their leadership styles depending upon the situation, the group, etc. So you'll see that as we go through. So now what we have to do is have a look at three leadership styles. So the way that leaders input these kind of qualities is dictated by their style. All right, so we'll have a look at those styles down here. So leadership styles then. We'll start here. We'll just start off by saying the three styles. You've got autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire. So autocratic, let's start here then, and we'll explain each one. And then we'll go down and look at their advantages or the benefits or the use of. So autocratic leaders then, okay, this is when, you think of autocratic, this is where the leader has autonomy, okay? You don't need to write that, but that's just a word that we can get out of auto, okay? So autonomy, and then what you're thinking there is that means that the leader makes decisions. They make all of the decisions, okay? And on top of that, it's a bit like a sergeant major in the army, if you think about it that way. Then, on top of that, they are what is called task orientated. Their number one focus is winning, is being successful. The task at hand is all they care about. They're not bothered about whether teammates get on with each other or whether the team likes them. They just want to win the task. Okay, and that is their complete focus. So if you switch over them and have a look over at democratic, of course the opposite to that is that somebody, rather than making all the decisions, they delegate responsibility. Okay, and rather than being focused solely on the task, a democratic leader basically infers that they're going to focus on social relationships. Okay, so they're kind of social orientated, relationship orientated, interpersonal orientated, where people will get on with each other because they feel that is something that's going to help team success. Now, what often that means, obviously, the word democracy. Okay, this leadership is a democracy in this case. So they'll delegate. What you would say, really, you don't have to write this, but the leader would always have the final decision, but they're more than happy to take on people's opinions. So going on from there, the final leadership style is laissez-faire. Okay, and this is basically where the group makes all of the decisions. Okay, so the leader does not make any of the decisions, and in fact the leader stands aside. Okay, so they will step back and the kind of group will make all the decisions. Now, sometimes this can happen where the group are just not listening to the leader, therefore they will make that decision themselves, but ultimately these are the two things you're going to need. Right, so let's have a look then when these would be used. Okay, so this is kind of your higher assessment objective. This is the kind of when they would be effective, what they would explain the use of. So if it's an autocratic leadership style, leader making all decisions, it will be really effective for large groups. Okay, so large groups where you need to tell people exactly what to do. There isn't chance for people to give their own opinions, to make their own decisions. It's really important that for large groups they can keep organised, and autocratic is the best way to do it. It's also really effective for things such as dangerous activities. You think of things like javelin. Okay, you're not going to delegate responsibility to a group of year 7 students about how they think they might throw the javelin. Okay, you're going to make sure that they, for dangerous activities, you're going to tell them exactly what they do. Get in a line. Okay. The other person stand 10 yards behind. Okay, when you throw, okay, you must walk. You can see what I'm getting at there. Also, it's really effective for low ability because it's very difficult to delegate responsibility to people with low ability because they don't understand what they're doing yet. So it's really effective when you tell people exactly what to do if they don't know what they're doing in the first place. Finally, research has stated that males tend to respond better to this autocratic approach, okay? Being told what to do, task orientated. Okay, so let's flip over them. Democratic, so we've already said about that. So delegates responsibility, focus on social relationships. This is much better. for small groups. Okay, that's your first thing there. Okay, because if you try to delegate responsibility to too big a group, it can start to become chaotic. It's also very good for safe activities, obviously, because if it's safer, there's less chance of an injury. And finally, or penultimately, you've got high ability. Okay, it's much better for high ability because if you delegate a responsibility, they have ideas and input that's going to be effective. Okay, so for example, you might delegate responsibility to a high-level football team to come up with a corner routine, or a hockey team to come up with a penalty corner routine, and that basically, because they have good opinions that they can use, this makes it more effective. Okay, finally, females tend to respond better to this type of leadership with regard to kind of leadership research. Then if we go on from, obviously the male and female is very generic, okay, but it is just something that will get you credit in the mark scheme because of previous research in this area. Laissez-faire then, group making all the decisions, leader stands aside. Now obviously this is only really going to be relevant or kind of applicable with high ability groups, and certainly those high ability groups with high levels of motivation, because if the leader's standing aside, you have to know that that group is extremely motivated for them to actually do anything and make decisions that are going to allow their performance to increase. So that's your kind of leadership styles. If we go on from here then, the final part of the screencast is going to be looking at the theories of leadership. So let's start off then with our trait theory of leadership. So trait theory of leadership then, as we know from personality, basically proposes that leadership qualities such as charisma, okay, we're going to use this specific quality now, or characteristic, are stable and enduring innate predispositions to act the same way in all leadership situations. It's basically saying that you're born with charisma. Okay, and you would use this charisma in a variety of situations. Obviously, there's loads of different leadership qualities you could use here. I've just used this as one example you could use if it was part of an exam question. Now, the slight difference to personality theories is within leadership, the kind of the trait approach, like, you know, you inheriting these innate predispositions that you've inherited from your parents. They base it on something called the great man theory. Now, the great man theory basically said that only men could be successful leaders. And obviously, this is a historical study. And they looked down and saying, right, male leaders, successful male leaders, pass down kind of leadership qualities to their sons, and that was the way, for example, the British Empire succeeded. That was the theory. So what this said then, for example, you could say down to here, you've got someone like Alex Ferguson, or Sir Alex Ferguson, I should say, former Manchester United manager, okay, passes down his leadership qualities to Darren Ferguson, who is an example, who is a football coach as well. So you could also look at, if you want to use other examples, you could look at things such as, let's say, Owen Farrell, okay, as current England captain. Okay, his dad, Andy Farrell, was the assistant coach for England in the past, and now still works in rugby now. So you look at that and think they have been passed. That is an example of a successful male leader, Andy Farrell, passing down leadership quality to his son, Owen Farrell. Okay, that's a rugby example. And if you think of any other examples, that would be absolutely great. Okay, however, and the key thing here is this theory can be said to be unfounded. Obviously, it's extremely sexist, as a lot of kind of theories were in the 1900s, 1800s, etc. So the reason why it's unfounded is because obviously there's been many successful leaders, not only in sport, in everything. You know, look at Margaret Thatcher, one of the most successful kind of MPs, Prime Minister, that we've had. So you look at that and think, right, successful female leaders. Let's give some examples. You could look at Tracy Neville, who won the Commonwealth Games as England netball coach. That's a good example to use there. However, the other thing that is good is that, you know, if you're talking about something being an innate predisposition, it doesn't always take into account learned behaviour. Okay, so learned leadership behaviour. So social learning doesn't take into account that you might actually learn these things. So if we go on to social learning theory then, of leadership. So what we've got here then, this proposes that leadership qualities such as communication are learned, because it's a social learning theory, as a result of the environment, imitation of significant others, and social reinforcement. So, for example, a young leader imitates communication skills from an experienced leader, okay, and this is reinforced if the team wins. So, It could be a captain reinforcing the communication skills from the coach. Okay, maybe kind of on the pitch, so they might take over their communication things, and then they won. So then that young captain thinks, right, I'm going to keep copying that, and then they become a leader very similar to the coach they have observed. Okay, now the downside, of course, to any social learning is it doesn't take into account those innate leadership traits, the things that you inherit from your parents or that you're naturally born with. And the other key thing here, of course, is that young leaders don't always imitate experience.